I still write jokes the same way I was writing jokes on Rugrats, and it seems to be still working. And it's still my favorite part of doing the show is where, when it can be really funny, and when I really feel like I'm pushing the envelope on the comedy.
All right, this is the Story Series podcast where we tell the stories behind the people. Peter, Gaffney, welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Brandon.
You have to be one of the most prolific animation screenwriters out there. Just to list a few of your credits, Beavis and Butthead, Rugrats, Aaahh! Monsters, to recent titles like Paw Patrol, Spidey and His Amazing Friends, Tots, which is where we met. I'm so excited to get into all that with you.
Okay, I have to tell you, I didn't work on Paw Patrol. So
oh, you didn't?
Not to my knowledge. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Somebody else asked me that, and it must be like floating out there on IMDb or something.
It is floating on IMDb. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, I actually had I did another podcast where somebody started saying, and now we want to talk about Paw Patrol. And it was like, I have to tell you, I did not work on the show. And it was like, oh, well, we still have like 25 minutes to kill.
Yeah. This is the Paw Patrol podcast, Peter.
Yeah, that's all.
That's so funny. All right, well, we're going to put that rumor to rest right now.
Thank
to
God.
bed.
Thank God.
Did not work on Paw Patrol, but pretty much every other show out there. And but I'd love to just connect the dots. Looking backwards, I like to start with origin stories. And so, if you could, where did you grow up?
I grew up in upstate New York in a place called Binghamton, a very small town, very not a really small town, but it was just a beautiful area. It was a great place to grow up. It was kind of idyllic. It was like riding your bikes through the woods and kind of thing.
Yeah. Were you always creatively inclined growing up? Like, what were you into as a kid?
I was originally an artist. I started out, I had my dad worked for IBM, and he and you remember, I don't know if you're probably too young to remember this, but they used to have this computer printer paper that was it was like unburst paper. So it was like just these long strings
like
of
perforated
paper.
sides, right?
It was unperforated, yeah.
Right.
And he would bring this stuff home for me to draw on. And in fact, it got to the point where they called this Peter paper at IBM because he would always be grabbing Peter paper to bring home for me. And I would just draw these long, long things on it. And I did that like from the time I was, I don't know, as young as I can remember, up until about the time I was about 10 or 11. And I realized that for some reason, I wasn't into comic books. So I didn't see how I could draw and have like time progression and story. So that's when I started writing. And I wrote this novel when I was 11 or 12 called The Adventures and Travels of Phil I. Hanno, Young Voyager, which was about an ancient Phoenician kid who stows away on a boat and ends up like in the middle of like Africa, just like all over the world and all these. And I wish I still had that. So I've been a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer.
And when you were drawing, what were you drawing? What were you exposed to where you gravitated towards drawing?
I think I loved adventure stories, and knights in shining armor, King Arthur, that kind of thing. And eventually, like when I was 11 or 12, I discovered Tolkien, and that sent me into the whole world of fantasy and eventually science fiction. And so that's really where my interest gravitated when I was that age. I had a newsletter for science fiction fans. Some friends of mine and I, we had this little thing. It was called Fantaseed, which was it had this print. The print was, because we were trying to make it as cheap as possible. The print was so small. It was like it was probably like less than 8-point type. And I don't know, like now, if I could ever find an issue of that magazine, I wouldn't be able to read it. My eyes would not be good enough to read it. But so that was kind of my initial thing, and I don't know why I moved away from that, but I did.
You moved away from
science fiction and fantasy. Yeah,
you did. And now this is around the time when you're junior high going into high school. Are you all in on writing at this point? Like what are your plans?
I was, yeah, but I didn't know. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I think I always assumed I'd be a writer, but I didn't know how it was going to work, and I didn't know how I was going to actually make a living at it. It didn't occur to me.
Yeah.
you know?
And it seems like your parents were supportive. I mean, bringing home all the Peter paper for
Yeah,
your
they were
drawing.
very supportive. They got
Yeah.
me a typewriter. I don't know if you remember typewriters, but they
Yes.
got me a typewriter when I was about 10. And and so yeah, they were completely supportive and but I mean, I think at some point I remember saying to my mother when she was like complaining about what I was doing, I said, Would you want me to be a lawyer?" And she said, "Yes, actually, I would."
You're like, well, got you there. Oh, so getting graduating high school, what are your plans? Were you thinking about going to university, or are you at that point?
Yeah, I was. I was totally on this. I was so focused academically. I was like, straight A student. If I ever fell off the high honor roll, which I never did, it would have been catastrophic for me emotionally. And so I don't know, I was just like so neurotically focused. I was valedictorian in my class. I went to Harvard. It was all like, and so that was like I had this like academic track to get into college, but I had no idea what I was going to do afterwards. And like I said, I guess I was going to be a writer, but I didn't know how that was going to work. I didn't have any idea about screenwriting or anything like that.
Yeah, and so you got into Harvard, studied there, and then at what point did you find the National Lampoon?
I was on the Harvard Lampoon in college. Then after graduation, I moved out to California with some friends of mine and looked for work. Finally got work in advertising. But I had a friend of mine from Harvard who was working for National Lampoon. He brought me in on National Lampoon, and that was like the start of my serious writing career.
Yeah, but you created this network for yourself when you were at Harvard. Was that something that you gravitated towards, the Harvard Lampoon? Like, had you heard of that beforehand?
I when I went to visit Harvard in my junior year of high school, I went to the Harvard Lampoon, and they have this like castle, this like amazing replica of a Flemish castle. It's the most amazing building on campus. And I went there when I was a junior in high school, and that's what made me go to Harvard, because I went to Harvard primarily to get on the Harvard Lampoon.
Really? And
Yeah.
I mean, that's a famous network of people, kind of a career starter,
It
isn't it?
wasn't when I first got on it. Between the time I got there and when I left, it kind of changed, and it became this thing where it became this factory. We had a couple of guys from the class ahead of me that got onto Saturday Night Live, and that started a kind of a domino effect. And so it really did become, almost too much so, like a pre-professional organization.
Aha. But when you first saw it, what did you think that you were going to do there?
I was gonna write comedy. That was the
Yeah.
interesting thing. That was my flip from science fiction and fantasy into writing comedy. It was something that happened in my high school years, and I started gravitating toward that and reading National Lampoon and realizing I wanted to do humor.
Yeah. And what were your influences at the time? What were you taking in the culture?
Well, I mean, the foremost influence was this book that the Harvard Lampoon put out called Lord of the Rings. It was a parody of Lord of the Rings, and I thought it was hilarious. And I would be interested to see how it holds up now. But it was like it really kind of it's what launched the National Lampoon, because Doug Kenny and Henry Beard, who wrote that book, founded National Lampoon based on the success of that book.
And so that was the thing that did it for you, where you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to do that.
I want to do that, yeah.
And
But I
what-
didn't know. I really didn't know that I wanted to do it professionally. I
Right.
really had no idea. I'll tell you, when I graduated from college, my career plan was to move to Los Angeles. And I wasn't. It wasn't because I wanted to become a screenwriter. It was just like, oh, we're going to move to L.A. It's far away, and it never occurred to me that like that's not really a career plan. That's a place.
Right. Now, what was it like to get into the Harvard Lampoon? Did you have to apply?
Yeah,
and-
there's basically a competition where you write like 6 pieces over the course of 8 weeks. It's very competitive.
Yeah, what kind of pieces? Like just
Just
sketches
humorous,
or
yeah. Like, well, not really sketches. I mean, this is like before people were doing TV. It was mostly prose parodies or just humorous pieces, the kind of thing you'd read in like Shouts and Murmurs in the New
Oh,
Yorker.
sure. Anything that you remember? Any subject that you wrote about?
Wow. I have not thought of that in many, many years. I have no recollection
But
whatsoever of what
whatever
I
it is, it
wrote.
got you in.
Yeah, it got me
And
in.
and did you enjoy your time there?
Yes, I did. But
Yeah.
I kind of ignored my academic career. That was I had been like this valedictorian. I'd been so
Right.
focused. My first semester freshman year before I got on the Lampoon, I had straight A's at Harvard. The second semester after I got on the Harvard Lampoon, the C's started coming in, and I realized they didn't really hurt. There was no physical pain involved in getting a C, and so I really, looking back on it, I wish I'd taken advantage. I had this like great academic, place with all these amazing professors, and I was just concentrating on, writing comedy and having fun.
Yeah. Well, and what did that do for your writing voice? Do you feel like that you developed a voice on the page at that point or through that process?
Not really. Maybe I did. There were a few pieces that I wrote that were very very close to my voice, and which is very it's interesting because I really feel like I have not really been writing in my voice for because most of the work I've done, I've worked on shows, and it's not really been my voice, and I haven't minded that because I think I adapt very well to doing other people's voices and fitting into like other people's worlds. But
Yeah.
it was kind of at the expense of my own original vision.
Interesting. You feel that way that obviously you've worked on so many different kinds of shows, which is each its own world, but you feel like that it comes at the expense of your own voice. You don't feel like you're still able to keep some of your voice on the page, but combine it with the show or
Yeah, yeah. I
a
mean,
little bit.
yeah, I do. I do combine my own voice. I mean, I think the comedy, my sense of humor comes out, but not my entire vision. And I think
Right.
my real vision as a writer is as a prose writer, not as a script writer. And it's so interesting because I've spent my entire career writing scripts, basically from the time I left National Lampoon until the present. Everything I've ever gotten paid for has been a script of some kind.
Yeah, and comedy is very heavy in animation. And so that's something that's carried throughout your career, right?
Yeah, I don't think I'd be working if I didn't have a sense of humor
Right, right.
for many reasons.
Yes, yes. So but you discover that you have a knack for this at Harvard, right? Like you're liking this very much at the expense of your academic
Yeah,
classes.
yeah. I found that actually in high school. I was doing that. I found that like writing comedy was, it was funny because I always thought that like I had maybe had like some higher calling, but I found comedy was easy. Like I had visions of writing like the great American novel, but what I was actually writing was comedy.
Yes, yes. So you mentioned Los Angeles was your plan. You thought it was a plan. It was really a place. But did you have an inkling that you wanted to pursue screenwriting out in Los Angeles?
No, in fact, what I was applying for were mostly like newspaper jobs on like small newspapers, and what I ended up doing was advertising, and it was only just by good fortune that my friend Kevin Curran invited me to come back to New York and work on National Lampoon.
So you relocated
I went back to New York for almost 10 years.
almost 10 years working for
I
which
worked for National
publications?
Lampoon for a year, and then I wrote some screenplays, and then fortunately I managed to get a job with MTV, and it was like MTV in the '80s. It was like the coolest place you could possibly be. I don't think I appreciated it at the time. I didn't know half the bands that were popular in the '80s, and I was constantly like writing scripts for the top 20 video countdown and having to ask people, so this Bon Jovi, who are they? You know.
What kind of things are you writing? Like what was that top 20 countdown? Like what are you
I'm
actually?
basically writing stuff for I don't know if you remember VJs, but that's
Yeah.
what VJs, like it's like so and now a new tune has come out from so and they've done this. And so that was a lot of what I did. The best stuff was promos. We had a great promo department, and the stuff I'm proudest of from that point was the promos I wrote. And the stuff that was most fun was the live coverage from places like Spring Break and Mardi Gras, where you'd go down and you'd be up like 24 hours a day because you'd be typing. These are still on typewriters, typing nonstop. You know, it was like like it'd be 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 9 o'clock, the Volkswagen Van Jam would be starting, and you'd be writing the copy for Kevin Seal or one of the other VJs to say.
Wow.
And that was so exciting. Live TV is very exciting.
At this point, you have a career, but do you feel like you have a career, or are you just kind of going?
I'm still feeling my way.
You feeling your way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you exactly almost to the day when my career really started.
Please.
And that was I at some point I decided that I had to move out to back to LA because there's to get a writing job in New York. I mean, there's Saturday Night Live and Letterman and it was just so few things. So I had to come back to LA. Once again, like the first time, I didn't have any idea what I was going to do when I got here. And but I came out, and the day after I arrived, to be perfectly accurate, I got a call from Paul Germain, the creator of Rugrats, and he said, "I've got this new show. It's about these babies, you know, and you were recommended to me by somebody at MTV because MTV and Nickelodeon, of course, are sister networks." And I said to myself, you know, no self-respecting kid is ever going to watch a show about babies, but I need a job. So yeah, sure, Paul, I'm on board. This sounds great. And that was the beginning of my animation career. And it was just like that one phone call totally changed my life and got me into this world. And
yeah, that's one of the most iconic kids shows of all time. Little did you know.
little did I know, and little did I know that it would be one of the best things that I ever worked on. You always think that you're gonna win lots of Emmys, but like the only Emmy I won was for Rugrats at the very beginning of my animation career.
You know what? Scott Gray said the same thing, who was also here recently, who worked early in his career on the Rugrats, and he was like, he got that Emmy out of the way, he said.
You know, the key to winning an Emmy is never buy a tux, because the moment you buy the tux instead of renting it, you know you'll never be nominated again.
You'll never wear it, right?
Yeah.
So why do you think that you were recommended for that show, having no experience in that field?
I think Paul was desperate to find writers. I think he had no idea how to look for writers. He talked to, I bet it was this guy, John Payson, who was a producer at MTV, who might have been somehow involved. And I don't know. I never really asked Paul where he got my name. He just said, somebody at MTV gave me your name. I was looking for writers. And
yeah, and they're putting the show together. And so you start working on this, and what's the learning curve like for you? Since it's kind of new territory to a degree.
It was definitely new territory for me. I'd never worked on, story-driven, shows of any kind, let alone animation. So it was all new for me. But I think it was new for all of us working on the show. I mean, I wasn't on it. I wrote a couple episodes during the first season, but I didn't come on staff till the second season. But I was working with Steve Vixton and Joanne Salabeher, who came out of film school. I don't think they had any particular interest in animation. I'm not even sure if Paul originally had any interest in animation. He was working on the Tracy Ullman show, and they did the 1 Minute Simpsons, and that's how he managed to get involved with Klasky Schupo and end up doing Rugrats.
One thing that I heard about working on that show was that obviously it wasn't a typical kids animated show, in that they were reading sitcom scripts as samples from writers. Did you find that was true? At least the way that you approached the episodes, it was kind of sitcom.
It was definitely sitcom. It was it was really great because none of us knew anything about animation. None of us are the writers. The directors and everything were all like old hands in animation. But we as writers didn't know a lot about animation. And Nickelodeon, who was doing the show, this was their first foray into animation. So none of us knew anything, and it gave us a lot more freedom than I've ever had anywhere else to do.
Really?
Yeah.
You think that was part of the magic of that show?
It was the fact that Nickelodeon, I think the real magic of that show what not only the fact that it was like this intensely talented group of people that got together, but it was that Nickelodeon didn't know what they were doing, so they gave us kind of free reign to do what we wanted to, and I mean, although we got some terrible notes. You always get terrible notes, but I think we did a show that would never have been possible at any other time than that. And it came back to bite them in the butt when they did Ren and Stimpy because they didn't know what they were doing, and they got this show that was almost unairable.
You're learning the screenwriting for animation through Rugrats. You feeling like you want to stick with it at that point? Like, do you get the bug?
It's interesting because I was so successful so fast that that's where I was getting that's where the job offers were coming from after Rugrats. And so it sort of just, I don't know that I made a conscious decision to stay in animation. And in fact, at various points I've wanted to get into live action just because the money is so much better.
Oh yeah, the difference between Writers Guild and Animation Guild
Yeah,
is,
it's crazy.
is
It's
zip
like,
codes of Beverly Hills versus
I did a couple episodes of The Simpsons, and
Yeah.
those residual checks are still coming in after 10, 15 years. And I was just thinking, like, God, if I got checks for every episode of Rugrats I ever wrote.
Amazing. But you're finding that there's steady work in animation at this point because there's
Yeah.
kind of this. I obviously grew up with the Rugrats. I love that show, and that was like this new wave of animation, this Nickelodeon '90s animation boom. And then you were right there for it, and you went also to Aaahh! Monsters,
Yeah,
which is a favorite of mine too.
I co-created Aaahh! Monsters with Gabor Chupo. It was really interesting because Gabor came to me with a drawing. It was like on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It says, "I drew this for my kids." And it was the four iconic characters from Aaahh! Monsters. And I said, "Yes, this is definitely a show." And so I developed. I wrote a Bible, and I wrote a pilot script for it. I didn't really work on the show. I wrote a few episodes for it, but I wasn't. I actually had moved on to Disney by then. But it was a fantastically kind of amazing thing to just go from this drawing to like an entire show in a period of a few months.
That's insane. And so, what were the battles like getting that show to greenlight?
It was not, to my knowledge, it wasn't that hard. But to be honest, I wasn't really there for it because I had left Klasky Schupo. Rugrats had ended. I had done my work on Aaahh! Monsters, and it wasn't maybe 6 months later I got a call from Chuck Swenson saying, "Hey, the show's going forward." So I don't know what battles they went through to get it on the air.
So you're at your next job by then, getting the update.
Yeah, yeah.
And what brought you to Disney?
They came to me with a great offer. This was that show, which I mentioned before we started talking here. It was called Nightmare Ned. It was a show that Michael Eisner thought was so great, and that it was an unmitigated disaster. But it was my first producing gig, and not that I actually did. Actually, it wasn't my first producing gig. I was just the story editor of that, and they brought in a producer over me, and we had completely different visions of what the show should be, and he won. And the show was like a storyboard driven show. The scripts kind of fell by the wayside. I got very well paid for a few months, then the show totally tanked. It was an unmitigated disaster in so many ways, but you had mentioned to even talk about that.
Yeah. Before we sat down, you mentioned that you got notes personally from Michael Eisner, who then was the head of Disney.
Yeah.
And he loved it, which might have been a signal that it's not going to be a great show if they.
Yeah. I don't know. There were reasons why it did. We had a lot of storyboard artists who just took off creatively in their own direction, and and a lot of them came from Ren and Stimpy, and their sensibility was not a Disney sensibility. that was really the bottom line of the whole show. It's like,
Wildly
this
different
is
tone.
yeah, and I don't understand sometimes. I don't understand the decisions that Disney makes sometimes. Like, why would they, go forward with this thing that is so wrong for their brand?
Interesting. But what were those notes that you got back from Michael Eisner?
He just looked at all my story ideas. He says, like, this show is gonna be a hit because every single one of these ideas is great. And that's like the
amazing.
piece of paper that I wish I had now.
Yes. Gosh. So going back for a second to Aaahh! Monsters, what was your process for putting that Bible together? I'm curious what about the show evolved as it made it to air, and what stayed the same in your original vision.
It came together very easily, and I think the reason it did was that those characters that Gabor drew were so rich. Just the drawings were so rich that I was able to imagine their whole world just from that one drawing. And it really it felt like a very organic process from the very beginning, where it didn't take any weird right turns.
And you're talking about the original Ickis, Oblina, Crumb, and what was that, Grumble?
And
Those
yeah,
original,
the
Grumble,
the
the teacher, or
yeah, what was it? The Grumble? I'm not sure. Ickis. The
yeah.
reason that character is named Ickis is because my dad's horse was named Ickis. My dad could not think of it. He had this colt, and he couldn't think of a name for it, so he just started calling it Little Ickis.
How do you go about coming up with a world like that?
It varies so much, just on because where's the starting point? And for instance, a show I'm trying to develop right now, if I ever get around to doing it, was based on an idea I had for what might be a marketable toy, which I'm not going to tell you about. But but I thought of this thing, and it was I started developing it like 10 years ago as a preschool show, and at some point I decided, this would be a lot more fun if I could take the cuteness of it and play against the cuteness with like a show for like 6 to 11-year-olds.
What's something that you think writers can learn from executives, and what's something you think executives can learn from writers?
Oh, I don't think either of us can learn anything from the other.
We're doomed.
It's like what can baseballs learn from oranges?
That's a brilliant answer. I think that sums it up, right? The dilemma in the industry, right?
Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's like a natural, it's like the crocodile and that gazelle trying to cross the river. It's like just a adversarial relationship, and I don't know. I don't know why it's so difficult, but it always is. And I've never been in a situation where those network notes were, easy, and we're not just like tearing your hair out half the time.
Are you a type of writer who used to get emotional about notes? Are you better at dealing with notes that you don't agree with now? How do you navigate that?
I think I've always been a little bit less emotional than a lot of people, because I've worked with a lot of people that have just torn their hair out over the stupid notes. And it's just like, I mean, they're ready to like commit murder. And I feel that way, but it's like, what's the point? Let's see what we can push back on. And that's a real strength in a story editor or a producer, somebody that knows how to push back on where it makes sense to push back, and where it makes sense to just say, okay, we'll just do this. Let's do it their way.
I feel like your career is a model for like how to sustain a writing career, across so many different shows. What do you find professionally, your habits that you've developed that have helped sustain you?
The main thing is just to make sure you meet those deadlines. Because I actually went through a period where I wasn't, and I figured like I'm working, I know all these people, and it'll be fine if I'm a few days late. And I slowly realized that that doesn't really fly. And, and it's like,
What was that change for? When you started to slip on the deadlines, where did that come from?
I don't know. It really was. I think it was just getting lazy. I think it was getting
Ah,
lazy and feeling a certain amount of like, well, I know what I'm doing here, and they're lucky to have Peter Gaffney work on this show. It's not a good place to be, frankly, ego
yeah.
wise or any other way.
Well, I mean, that can happen, right? To all of us, we could kind of think that way, right? And I think sometimes it's helpful to not completely abandon the beginner's mindset. I talk to a lot of people in our field, and there's a constant feeling of you're breaking in all the time, but you're breaking in at a new level. Do you feel that way?
Yeah.
Like you're
Well, I
always
mean,
auditioning no matter what?
things are always changing, and and the older you get, the harder it is to keep up with those changes. So you are always auditioning. I mean, as you're working in a medium where that's just even if you're Helen Mirren, you're still auditioning,
Yeah.
and in some way or other, and it's good in a way. It's good because like I said, if you get into a spot where like I kind of was, where you don't feel like you have to be on your toes, that's going to show in the finished product.
Right, right. And what do you find is the same as when you were starting out? Because you're looking at Rugrats to Spidey and His Amazing Friends or Tots. What's constant?
Um, I think the comedy is the constant. I
Mm,
think the comedy has remained, pretty much the same thing. I still write jokes the same way I was writing jokes on Rugrats, and it seems to be still working. And it's still my favorite part of doing the show is where when it can be really funny and I really feel like I'm pushing the envelope on the comedy.
And you mentioned wanting to get into live action and that that kind of struggle to do that. Do you find that being pigeonholed is a real thing in the industry? The way people see you versus how you see yourself?
It's definitely a real thing because in the past few years, I've done more and more preschool stuff. And once you get into the whole preschool world, it's very hard to get back up into like the 6 to 11 age. And I sort of feel like my entire career, I've been playing to younger and younger audiences.
Yeah.
I started with National Lampoon, and so I was like maybe going for like 20-year-olds, and then like MTV, and I'm doing 14-year-olds, and like Rugrats is like 10-year-olds, and then I'm on something for Tots, like for 4-year-olds.
Right. Well, and now there's YouTube channels for babies, right? It's
Yeah,
like getting younger and younger. But I think that is an industry trend. There's just more going on in the preschool space. Do you find that that's true
it
rather than
certainly.
like the 6 to 11 space?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it just has to do with the habits of kids these days. I think there's less and less there's less and less of that window between 6 and 11. I think kids are growing up faster. They're becoming way more sophisticated, and they're taking in more sophisticated forms of entertainment. And if you're a boy and you're 10, you're into video games, maybe you're into something else. There's all sorts of other avenues other than like traditional TV,
Yeah.
and
I was talking to someone in the consumer licensing space, and they had mentioned a trend of kids essentially uh, leaving toys behind at a younger age,
oh, that's interesting.
just
I didn't
because
know
of the
that. Yeah.
electronics and the screens. And so naturally, that means that the type of shows, the toys that'll bring them into a show, I mean, those are going away because they're just stopping toys, which is kind of alarming. Like,
It is. It's definitely alarming.
right?
But I always wonder people are always alarmed about the state of our youth. And, we're worried about screen time now, and we're worried about, the way, boys are facing this huge hurdle in life. But people have always thought that like kids were totally messed up and that the world was changing in so many bad ways. And you have to I think there's definitely reason for being concerned with people being on screens like their entire lives. But at the same time, you have to take into account the fact that the world is always changing, and that people have managed to survive a lot worse things than being addicted to screens.
So I want to get your thoughts on AI And so can you talk a little bit about the impetus for starting the Substack?
Yeah, well, I was just, as soon as I was introduced to AI, I realized this was going to be transformative for the world and for certainly for our industry. And but I'm not sure yet how it's going to transform things. And I don't think anybody knows how it's going to transform things. I don't know whether it's going to put us out a lot of jobs or what. I think there's a lot of danger involved with AI in terms of just in terms of, career wise for people. I'm not sure I would, become an artist right now. I think that's, and I don't know if I would become a TV writer right now, if I was a kid. But I think it has tremendous potential for us to do interesting collaborative things with it. I can't believe how good it is in so many ways, and I can't believe how bad it is in so many ways. And I think it's got tremendous potential to allow us to create interesting stuff. But but that's aside from the economic impact on jobs, which I think it's totally up in the air, and also the impact on you know ownership of creative ownership.
Yes. And what are you doing specifically on Substack? You mentioned my AI thinks I'm a mess.
Yeah, it's just conversations that I have with ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah. And can you talk a little bit about that? What are you discovering as you're doing this?
I'm just discovering how funny AI can be, because my initial interactions with AI was that, like, this is very impressive as a pro stylist, but it's not at all funny. But I'm getting really funny stuff out of just with very simple prompting out of AI. I'm just having these conversations with it, and it's the more personal I make the conversations, I think the funnier it is, and the more the funnier the AI is in its responses.
Yeah, well, okay. So on that, obviously, no one knows what AI is going to do to the industry, but you said you're still writing a novel.
I am. I'm
And
writing a
so,
novel like almost totally without, like I'll use AI if I want to ask, like, what's the word for that spiky thing that they used to put receipts on? I'll ask it that. But I'm not using it in any other way on this project, because, and I would use it if I were like developing a show. If I almost any other thing, I would use it pretty liberally. I wouldn't have it actually write for me, because I think, because I don't know what it's been trained on, and I don't know to what extent, I might be stealing from somebody without knowing it. But in terms of like coming up with ideas, if I want like 85 ways that a soccer ball can be mistaken for something else, I'll just ask AI
sure.
for that.
You mentioned you're not sure that you would be a TV writer if you were starting out now, yet you're still writing a novel right now. Why do you feel, why are you writing this novel?
Well, I'm not doing it to get rich.
Yeah.
I'm doing it because it's something I've always wanted to do. And I have to be aware of the fact that it may never get published. And by the time it gets published, everyone else is going to be writing with AI. It's very tempting, because I'm a little bit afraid that AI could do a better job than I'm doing right now with some of the scenes. Some of the, it's like, well, I don't know if like writing an action scene or something like that. It probably would be better than me. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that road quite yet. I want to, like, it's kind of like, this is for me.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at, where there's a human element to just the act of creating something or writing something, that first and foremost, it has to be for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has to delight you. And then it's for the rest of the world, whatever condition or shape the world is in. But right, like it has to be, you're doing this for yourself first and foremost. The looming threat of AI, notwithstanding.
Yeah, it's true. When I was working on at MTV, we had this live talk show, and we brought in this guy named Peter Elwell, who was he was mainly an illustrator. He had never worked in television before, but we thought his stuff was so great that we hired him. We didn't know him from Adam, but we hired him. And I used to see him in his office at the typewriter, and he would just be laughing at the stuff that he wrote. And I think that is the ideal for me of a writer, is somebody who like is sitting alone in their room, laughing their head off at something they've written.
Yeah, yeah. I would do that on tots. Like I've done that throughout my career, not because it's like, oh, this I'm so funny, but you're imagining the scene in your head and you're hearing the actors and you go, oh, this is going to be good. And that's what I mean, that's why we do it, right? For those moments of like, oh, this really sings. I love this. And I want to put it out there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, that just made me think that, like, another great thing about working in animation or working in television in general is the fact that sometimes things get better. And you write a scene that you think is good, and then you see the actors, you hear the actors do it, and it's even better than you imagined. They just so along the line, more and more people bring good things to it. Meanwhile, the executives bring bad things to it. But you've got directors, artists, actors bringing such good stuff along the line, and it's such a delight when something you do, something you've written alone in that room, laughing to yourself, you actually see it on the screen and it's actually good, way better than you imagined it could be.
Yeah. Is there anything that you can say about the novel that you're writing, or at least the age group that you're?
Oh, it's an adult novel. It's about a 63-year-old widow who realizes that her neighbor thinks she killed her husband. It's a murder mystery.
Murder mystery.
Yeah, totally unlike anything I've ever done professionally.
And where did that come from within you?
It was an idea that it was something I started writing, and it was so unlike anything that I've done, and it was so uncommercial in a way, because I had some ideas for some YA novels that I think would have been really good, and I kind of started working on it, but this, for whatever reason, it just got me, and I've been working on it for about a year now. So
how has your definition of success changed over the years now versus when you were starting out, or has it changed?
I mean, it's certainly changed. As you get older, you're far less attached to any of the trappings of success. You just want the money.
Right. Yeah. And that's freeing in a way, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's also you have diminished expectations as you get older. It's like, I'm not like when I won that Emmy, I was thinking there'd be another one, the next year and the year after that, and you realize, and it's no big deal that there isn't. It's kind of like getting that C at Harvard. It was, once you realize that it's really not that important, it just doesn't change what your day-to-day life is like. There's almost no achievement. I found this at a very early age when I was writing when I was doing the Harvard Lampoon. There is, each person on the staff, a few people, like 5 people every year, get to edit an issue of the magazine. And my best friend and I edited this issue of the magazine, and we spent, months getting, putting it together, assembling all the pieces, laying it out by hand. And then we get this thing back from the printer, and you look at it, and your first thought is, this is great. And then like 5 minutes later, it's a piece of paper. And I found that with almost everything. It's like, you get a brand new car and you think it's the greatest thing in the world for 5 minutes. And then
I think that's fascinating. And I love that insight into how you think that getting that first C at Harvard was like, wait a minute, my day-to-day life hasn't changed. And so how you viewed life maybe changed, or at least how you were approaching your academic career. And that same truth is kind of ever present, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like a diminishing sense of needing to be validated by other people.
And
you
now
know.
you could do it yourself. You could validate yourself now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Or I don't need
Or you don't.
validation. I don't need validation. I'm just happy living my life. And I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not really striving for anything. I figure, if I can, like this novel, I don't know if it's ever going to get done. I mean, I've made a commitment to finish it, so I think it will get done. But the pleasure is in writing it, not in, I know that if this book comes out, I'll be overjoyed for 2 days and then it'll be on
Right.
the shelf and forgotten.
Sure. Well, it's funny that you say that because uh, looking at like just my own career milestones and like when I was on, so when we met on Tots, I was a staff writer, probably season 2 or 3 by the time we had met.
Yeah.
And I started on that show as a script coordinator. And halfway through the first season, there's a spot that opened up and I was freelancing at night already. So I thought, well, I got to put in my name just so I know I spoke up.
Eh.
And I ended up going to me and I became a staff writer. So going from script coordinator where you have assistant level responsibilities to a staff writer where you're full-time writing, which is, that is the dream, is like writing full-time and then paying rent as a writer is like,
Yeah.
and I've never been happier than making the jump from assistant to staff writer. I've been as happy. Like I got the opportunity to co-create Cocomelon Lane with Guy
Yeah.
Tobis, right? And I made the jump from staff writer on Tots to story editor. And I was the head writer. And it felt great. But was I happier than going from coordinator to staff writer?
Yeah.
No. I was probably as happier. And I don't think I'll ever be happier than that. But not in a bad way, just in a way of like, there's just something about striving and just taking pleasure in the journey but not like trying to top yourself every year, every
Yeah.
couple of years, because
Yeah, but you
you're
can't.
not. Like if you're
Yeah.
really honest with yourself, like, you can get an award and that would feel great, but for how long?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. I remember being able to say was paying the rent as a writer, and that is so huge.
I mean, that's the success.
Yeah. Although I was at the time I was working for this ad agency, and I told somebody, it was probably some girl at a bar, like I'm a writer, and I told her what I did. She says, "Oh, you're a copywriter."
There's always someone who's going to put you in your place, right?
Exactly. I was at my friend Kevin when I won the Emmy. He said, I didn't think the daytime Emmy would be as big as the nighttime Emmys.
That's funny. Right. I think I heard an interview with someone and they mentioned their Emmy and then they got some comment that was like, well, it's a daytime Emmy. Or it's like, there's always someone who's going to just like jab you if you are allowing yourself to get that external validation, right?
Yeah.
To just bring, that's so
Yeah.
funny.
I had a meeting once in Francis Ford Coppola's office up in San Francisco,
Ooh.
and Francis wasn't there, but it was an executive with his company. We met in his office, which is it's like the interior of like a steampunk dirigible.
Is that Zoetrope?
Yeah, it's the same office building. It was in it wasn't Interview with a Vampire, but one of those vampire movies. But anyway, this office was fantastic. And as you come up the little stairway from the main office up into this little penthouse that was Francis's office, there was a little table about this big with like 9 Oscars arranged on it like a bowling pins. And it was like, oh my God, that's something. Okay, that would be quite an achievement to have.
Yeah, and even still, he's got to fight for what he wants to make.
Yeah, still.
This is something I ask every guest. It's called the rule I break. So every industry has rules. Some are there for a reason, and some are just begging to be broken. So what's a rule in your field that you don't follow or believe in?
Asking for permission is the rule that I always break, because I always, when people are nervous about, can we do this? I always say, yeah, let's just do it. And, somebody can take us to task for it later. But I think that's the thing is making decisions that I'm not really empowered to make is the rule that I break.
I love that. Because why? Asking for permission, you get shut down and then you don't do the thing.
Well, or you might not. Oftentimes there's like nobody around to ask. And it's like people are afraid to do something. And it's like, The easiest thing is to just do it, I think, and not worry about what somebody's going to say afterwards. 'Cause, like, nobody's going to be shot. We're not going to be, we're not going to be put up against the wall and shot for having
Yeah.
sent out the thing without somebody's approval or whatever.
Before we go, I like to do a rapid fire round. 5 questions. You can say as much or as little as you want. What was the last book you read?
I'm really embarrassed because the book I'm reading right now is Proust's Remembrance of Things Past. And I feel like wow, what a snobby thing to say. I was gonna,
Harvard
yeah,
graduate.
oh my God, I almost didn't go to Harvard because I was reading, I don't know if you ever remember a book called 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's a wonderful.
I have heard of it. I haven't read it.
It's a magical realist novel. It really it started the whole magical realist boom, and it was huge when I was applying to Harvard, and I went to visit Harvard, and I stayed with these guys in their dorm, and there was this guy and who was very very kind of prep school, exactly the reason like why you might not want to go to Harvard. You saw the image you have of like Harvard was like, and he said, "So what are you reading?" And I said, "Well, I'm reading 100 Years of Solitude." And he says, "Well, I would never read a novel except in the original language. But of course, in Spanish, there is Cervantes, and then there is Cervantes." And it's like, oh my God, I don't want to be anywhere near people like that. So when I say I'm reading Proust, I feel like I've become one of those.
You
people.
become one of those.
But you figure like I'm not getting any younger. If I'm ever going to read Proust, now's the time to do it.
And yeah, I was going to ask what pulled you to that.
It was sort of thinking like, I think I want to tackle this. I want to tackle something big, and it's been almost a year. I think I'm almost, maybe not quite a year, but I'm almost done. I'm down to 1.5 books left out of the 6. So,
What's a movie you love rewatching?
I've watched Apocalypse Now. Speaking of Francis Ford Coppola, I've watched Apocalypse Now probably 200 times.
And what about that film?
I don't know what it is, but I just love it. I find like every moment in that film is just it's just fun. It's just like such fun performances, such beautiful cinematography. It's a magical movie for me. The other one I've watched a million times is Badlands, the Terrence Malick movie.
Oh yeah,
which is an utterly almost perfect movie.
Yeah, that was his first one.
It was his first movie. It was made for like a couple $100,000.
Who was that? Oh, also, was it Martin Sheen in that one
It was
too?
Martin Sheen.
Apocalypse Now and Badlands.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I talked to Martin Sheen, and this was like actually when he was promoting Apocalypse Now, I was doing movie reviews for the Harvard Lampoon, and so I got to go to all these movie things. I actually wasn't writing any reviews. I was just like getting free tickets to movies and to these like press things. And so I met Martin Sheen, and I said, "I loved you in Badlands." And he said he thought that movie was going to like make his career, and like it just sort of kind of sunk without a stone.
Yeah, I could see it probably flopped at the box office, but it's since become regarded as a classic. Beautiful movie, right? And who's is it? Sissy Spacek in that?
Yeah, Sissy Spacek. Yeah,
Badlands.
That and Agira, the Wrath of God, the Herzog
Ooh,
movie.
Herzog. The first Herzog and Kinski collaboration. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. If it wasn't this, what's another career field you could see yourself in?
I mean, other than writing, I really don't know what I would do. I have no idea. I'm certainly not qualified to do anything else, and I can't even imagine what it would be. I mean, I might be a librarian. I could imagine that.
A librarian.
That's about as far away from writing as I think I could get.
What was your major at Harvard?
Folklore and mythology.
Folklore. So still literature.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I ever received, and this is like, there's absolutely no question about this. When I was in my early 20s, I was taking Tai Chi classes at the Zen Studies Society in New York City. And the teacher was this elder. I say he was elderly. He was probably no older than I am now, but he seemed like this elderly Chinese man with a very thick accent. and he would come dressed in a suit. I don't know if he was coming from his job or what. And he taught Tai Chi, and he would say, relax, relax. And that's definitely the best advice I've ever gotten.
That's interesting that you said Tai Chi, because you mentioned yoga that you do regularly now. Have you always meditated or had some degree of just relaxing and silence? And
when I started Zen meditation in my 20s, and for about 10 years I did it religiously, and then I stopped. And I've only gotten back into it in the past 10 or 15 years.
What pulled you back into it?
I needed it.
You needed
I
it.
needed it. I was just getting my life back together after a number of things had happened. My father had died. I had gotten sober. My life had sort of transformed in a lot of ways, and I decided to go back to Zen. And I'm about to go on a 7-day retreat in about 2 days.
You are?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you mentioned sobriety. I'm sober too. Been sober September 22nd, 2014. It was a Monday. I got sober. Yeah.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Yeah. Do you care to share?
Yeah, my date is January 16th, 2010.
January 16, 2010. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's something that I found that I needed to do, that I had reached like if this isn't enough, it'll never be enough. And I had that in my extended family. I saw where it could go. And I made that. I was living overseas at the time, and I made that decision.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you did. I wish I had done it when I was your age. It would have made a lot of difference. But it's definitely the best decision I've ever made.
Yes.
It was, and it totally changed my life. I really felt like I was literally reborn. Halfway through my life, I was literally reborn when I got sober. So
Good for you, Peter. Good for
thanks.
you.
Good for you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. This was such a pleasure and an honor to talk to you. I was so excited that you were coming in, and with everything you've done, it could take 10 podcasts. And so this was just such a privilege to get to talk to you for this past hour. And so thank you for coming in.
This was a delight, Brandon. Thank you so much.
Hey, before you go, thank you for listening. If something in this episode moved you or even made you pause for a second, please consider following the show, leaving a review, and signing up for the weekly newsletter at storyseriespodcast.com. That's where I share my personal takeaways from each episode, what stuck with me and why, one story at a time. See you in the next one.